Hi friends, welcome back to your Chess Analyze series. Today we're looking at a game sent in by a viewer. It features a very nice closed position and very interesting on how to maneuver your pieces and look out for pawn breaks. So I'm going to jump right into the game. Which started out as a 1d4, knight f6, c4, c5. So we get a Benoni defense after d5, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, white goes e4, all fairly standard, d6, knight f3, castles, bishop e2, e6, castles, and here black played the move knight to a6, which is an idea that is fairly common in the Benoni. The knight will head back towards the c7 square, and black will look to expand with a6 to b5. Here white played the move pawn to a3, rook to e8, bishop to e3, but notice that black isn't taking here on d5, so the position is still fairly closed in the center. In this position, black played the move knight to g4, hitting the bishop, so bishop goes to g5, f6, bishop h4, and black decides to close everything up with the move pawn to e5. And now the structure resembles more of a King's Indian rather than a Benoni, where this rook would probably rather be on f8 right now. So white played the move pawn to h3. This is okay. I would also consider playing knight to d2 here, which wouldn't create any unnecessary holes in our position. Also allows us to play f3 later on a little bit more safely. But h3 is okay. Knight goes back, knight to d2 now, and now pawn to g5 is a slight positional mistake here for black, because black wants to play f5 in a lot of these positions, similar to a King's Indian, but by playing g5 first, he's going to weaken these squares on e4 and these light squares in particular quite heavily. Whereas if he played with the pawn on g6, then he could take back with the pawn sometimes. So we have bishop g3, rook goes to f8, and bishop to g4. It makes sense to trade off these light squared bishops because this is the worst piece in this sort of structure. All our pawns are on white squares. So knight takes g4, pawn takes, knight c7, and here white played an interesting move, played the move pawn to a4. So at the moment we can see that we have some sort of King's Indian structure. We can tell it because of the bishop on g7 and the way these pawns are closed on d6 and e5. So specifically speaking, in the King's Indian, white is usually better on the queen side, and the plan usually involves pushing pawns on the queen side, and black wants kingside counterplay. In this position, black has basically closed off always kingside counterplay, so we should be trying to open up on the queen side as quickly as possible here. So I would rather play the move pawn to b4 here to really open up some counterplay, because we've basically shut everything down on the king side, so we don't need to worry about our king being attacked. After a4, it's going to be very hard to get any pawn breaks going. So queen e8. So knight b5, trading off these knights. I'm not sure about this move either, because we can see the quality of the pieces. This knight is a lot better. This knight on c3 is a lot better than the knight on c7. And so there's no need to really trade off these pieces. Also, black has a lot more, white has a lot more space here. So we want to keep some pieces on. I would still go for b4, maybe with a5 first, is an idea. So we have captures with the c pawn. So white is looking to maneuver this knight into c4. That makes a lot of sense. Here the rook goes to a3. So maneuvering this rook across to h3 makes sense to try and stop the move pawn to h5 here. King g7, queen to e2, queen e7, knight c4. So we see this knight maneuvering towards this e3 square, maybe going towards f5, f3. So I'm not 100% sure about this move, because it does block in the rook now, which can't come back to the queen side. In this position, the main pawn break is still probably b4 for white if he wants to win. Otherwise, for black, might be looking to play the move pawn to a6 at some point, or maybe h5 as well. So it's very key that in these closed sort of pawn structures, you keep an eye on all the possible pawn breaks and try to blockade them. Rook h8, rook h5. So white does blockade this pawn break, but at the same time the rook is no longer in the game, and there's no clear way that white is going to be able to win on the king side. I still think that the queen side should be where we are playing here. Queen c4. Yeah. So black is going for this a6 pawn break we talked about earlier. Takes, and now all of a sudden we have this weak pawn on b5. I'm not so sure about this anymore. I feel like it's starting to get a little bit shaky. At some point I feel like everything could just drop. And yeah, now we have our queen defending d5 and b5, and the king is going to e4 just to blockade the pawn. So this is not usually a good sign, because I feel like our pieces are tied down to basically every single one of black's pawn breaks, and you don't want your pieces tied down. Generally speaking, you want your pieces to be freer. It looks closed, but black still has this h5 break at any time. Yeah, and then slowly black will invade here with the queen and the rook. So the queen will eventually come here. And black will win this game. Yeah. And black goes on to win the rest of the game. So basically what happened in this game was white didn't go for the correct play on the correct side. I think if you went for the queen side play a lot quicker, it would have been a lot better. And just knowing the pawn structure and being familiar with the plans is also very, very helpful. So I hope you guys enjoyed this particular video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.